I said when we rejoined you earlier before the weekend that Plymouth Argyle Football Club was the gift that keeps on giving. Well, it's brought up trumps this time around, hasn't it? Welcome back to an incredible match review featuring an FA Cup third round tie at the club who have the second best home record in the greatest league of them all, but they are humbled. Humbled by the worst team on the road in English football. Plymouth Argyle go to the G-Tech Community Stadium and they beat Thomas Frank's Brentford 1-0 in the most incredible turn of events. Joining me this evening, John Allsop, Sam Down, Adam Price. We're not going to go through the usual introductions. We haven't got time. We have so much to get in to the next hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, who knows. We have got a match review coming up. We have got a talking point on Timothée Pušák, his signing from the German league to play at left back. We have got to talk about transfer activity. We have got to talk about the small matter of the very best club side in the world coming to Home Park in a few weeks' time. Before, at 9 o'clock, we'll be joined by Scott Coyne, who is a Belgian football expert. He will be joining John, Sam, and Adam. My health is not going to allow me to do 2 hours, so I'm going to dip out at the halfway point. John will take over the ship. Scott Coyne will join us at 9 o'clock this evening to talk all things Miron Muslic. That is your hour. Get your questions in now before 9 o'clock. We will star as many as we can to put to Scott Coyne. Whatever you want to know about Miron Muslic, send the questions in. We will get them to him a little bit later on in the show. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Audio listeners, really sorry you can't get your questions in. We will be looking at that in future when we have special guests on in this sort of fashion. But hey, look, Sam Down, I always come to you for the match review. It'd be wrong to change the trend now. Brentford 0, Plymouth Argyle 1. Take it away.
Yeah, wow. I just didn't think the week could get any more crazy after the very frenetic and stressed live pod we did on Friday night. I woke up expecting probably the best case scenario being an uneventful, narrow loss, and the worst case scenario being
Didn't
a bit of
you?
an
Didn't you
embarrassment.
technically not wake up?
That's very true. I did not actually wake up. I didn't properly get to sleep. I was so wired. I think I had like about a 20-minute sort of doze in and out, but I was so wired after the extraordinary events of Friday that I didn't properly sleep. I got maybe 20 minutes drifting in and out, and about another sort of hour on the bus going up, and that was my lot really. Um, yeah, so as I said, I was expecting a best case scenario, sort of punchy loss, worst case scenario being an embarrassing loss. And we went to Brentford and we were really, really good for most of the game. They barely had any chances at all. I think Hazard had to make a couple of good-ish sharp saves first half, but still, they were relatively expected. They wouldn't be saves that you would say were miraculous at all. That they were saves. If he hadn't made them, you kind of asking questions if you keep him maybe. But he did well to punch them away. But Brentford really had very little. And the more the game went on and on, the more we thought, this is actually a creditable performance from Nance and Joe Screens to add to the two that we already had. And then we went at the half time. That was almost like a bit of a celebration. We were almost jumping up and down. But we kind of all thought, well, they're going to bring on Wisa, Lewis Potter and Buemo. They're all coming shortly. And we've done well if we leave it until the big guns come on. The fact that we've forced them to bring the big guns on would be a good thing in and of itself. And when they came on, I think Brentford had a spell of being a bit more dominant with the ball. They still didn't really, what I would say, create anything clear cut at all. The chance creation was still poor, but they were a bit more controlled. They were a bit more dominant for about 10 minutes after Mbeumo came on. But we wrestled control back again. And from the minute sort of 75 onwards, it really looked like we were the more likely team to nick it. To be fair, we as much as Brentford didn't really have any real clear-cut chances, in fairness, neither did we really. We had a lot of like good moments that were nearly chances, but there was the ball that went across the box that their defender brilliantly headed behind to deny Callum Wright a near post tap in. That was very close to being a fantastic chance. But we looked lively, we looked threatening, and then of course we know what happened next. Great Brett was a tactical switch up by Nance to go to 4 at the back. Sorinola got moved over to right back, and yeah, we broke away. Ball goes in for Whittaker. We all thought he'd taken too long with it. We all thought he'd maybe taken one touch too many, but the space opened up. He found it, and fantastic goal by Morgan Whittaker in what live comments are telling us could be his final game for the club, because apparently Peter O'Rourke has reported that Morgan Whittaker
Shut up!
could be going to Burnley.
There's a question coming about that in a minute. Stop it. Carry on with the match review.
Okay, let's just pretend I didn't read the thing that's just made my heart sink. And yeah, the full-time scenes were absolutely and utterly incredible. I do not think there was a single dry eye in that away end when JB and Beidou pushed Kevin Nancekivell into the adulation of the away supporters. It was the little delay, the little run up, and then the absolute roar. I've never been in celebrations quite like it, really. Apart from maybe Callum Wright at Shrewsbury is the only one that I think compared in recent minds, and maybe a couple of one of the other late winners, but certainly very rare. Yeah, Nancekivell lapping up the adoration of the away fans, pointing to Joe Edwards as well to really emphasise his part in it. It's not anything that will be forgotten very easily. It was an incredibly emotional moment, an incredibly poignant moment. He very nearly broke his ankle in the process when he jumped with such passion that he nearly turned his leg on the pitch. Very thankfully he didn't. But yeah, what can I say? After the extraordinary Friday came an even more extraordinary Saturday, and now a slightly less extraordinary, but still by far means uneventful Sunday.
Slightly less extraordinary. We've just been drawn against the best club side in the world. I think that ranks as a pretty extraordinary Sunday.
I did say it was slightly less.
Yeah, true. Do remember, I am going to be plugging this for the next 53 minutes or so before I exit stage left. Do get your questions in for Scott Coyne, the Belgian football expert, who'll be joining us later on in the show, around about 9 o'clock tonight. Get your questions in about anything you want to know about what we can expect from Miron Muslic and the tricky greens going forward.
I have a question. I have a question for Sam quickly. Sam, did you manage to get a half and half scarf to complete your kitchen collection?
Well, yes, that question was actually already asked by Zach in the comments. So
was it? Okay, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, well, there's not really much room for it, really. We'd have to move other stuff around if we were to do so. But
well, hang on. Surely take the Liverpool one down and wear it to the game, and then put the Brentford one up in its place.
The Brentford one?
Yeah, from yesterday.
I assumed you meant like a new half and half scarf for when we play Liverpool again. Is what I thought you were getting at there. But,
well, and that as well.
I don't think anybody produced any half and half scarves for yesterday. No.
Oh, they did.
Did they?
Yeah, loads on sale outside.
Far too many.
If I managed
John bought a box full.
I did not.
I've just seen a comment that's come up. That's I won't libel any of I'll slander any of our fans, Paul. But rest assured, our decision to move was nothing to do with certain loud and shall we say, combative people who may have been sat near us. But it was very much to do with just wanting to sit near our mates who had a few spares near them. So don't worry about that.
Let's get back on track then in the game itself, John, because you three were lucky enough to be in West London yesterday at the G-Tech Stadium. I had the pleasure of listening to Ian Dennis and Rob Green on 5 Live yesterday, which is a novelty in its own right, Argyle being the main game on a Saturday afternoon on BBC Radio 5 Live. And I have to say they were both equally complimentary of Plymouth Argyle up until it was asked about Rob Green about any memories of playing at home park, and he was less than complimentary of the travelling that him and his Norwich team had to do that day. One thing that came through from the minute the coverage began from the G-Tech Stadium yesterday was the sheer noise of that away end yesterday. It was unbelievable through the radio. that win, without getting too emotional, because we have a little bit of an emotive subject coming up in the running order in a little moment's time. That win was for everybody who's been to away games this year, wasn't it? The torture we've all had on the road this season, that win was for everybody, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if anyone can hear, but my voice is in absolute shreds, as it was even by the end of the game yesterday. You know, when the chants, I sort of was doing one of the chants after full time, maybe the just can't get enough one, and my voice just broke basically, and I had to sort of like mouth the words. Still like struggling to talk now. Phenomenal, yeah. I think Port Vale, when we won the league, for me would probably beat yesterday's atmosphere just because of the stakes and the sort of celebratory nature of the occasion. But that was certainly, I would say, the second best away end that I've ever been in with Argyle. You know, from minutes, well, even before the game up to the end of it, very loud chanting that got increasingly raucous as the game went on, as you would expect, and the limbs for the goal were something very special as well. And I will say, Brentford, it was a wonderful club to visit. I think probably all of our first visits there, those who went, given that we haven't played them since they moved to their new ground. I had been to the old Griffin Park, but not the new stadium. I was really impressed with it. Architecturally, it's a beautiful stadium. It doesn't really quite come across on TV when you're watching games. Some of the sort of like roof design is really stunning. It doesn't really look like it should be a Premier League stadium, or even really in England. It wouldn't look out of place in Scandinavia next to a large IKEA or something. But no, it's a lovely stadium. I thought the stewards were top class. It was just a great match day experience. Brentford fans, all of those that we saw in the pubs before and after were very friendly. I will say it was probably the quietest home fans I've ever heard in my time as an Argyle fan. That genuinely, we all made jokes about Stoke fans last week. At least they sung a couple of songs. I didn't hear a single song from the Brentford fans at all. Literally not one. I'm sure there were a couple, but maybe we just drowned them out. But yeah, no, it was unbelievable. It was great support, and yeah, and I think as Nance said after the game, it is for the fans. Those of us who follow Argyle up and down the country have had an absolutely miserable time of it recently. Saying something when you go to Derby and draw 1-1 with a massively deflected free kick, and that's about the best memory you have away from home up to now in the season, right? I mean, that's not a particularly good result in isolation. Tell a lie, actually, QPR was pretty good, just because we had our backs up against the wall for so much of that game and managed to get a point. But yeah, by and large, it's been dreadful. So yeah, to go there, not only win, but keep a clean sheet, and not only keep a clean sheet, but as Sam said, deserve to keep a clean sheet. We did not ride our luck, I don't think whatsoever. We literally just stifled them and limited them. Absolutely superb. Yeah, our fans have deserved a lot better on the road for the amount of miles our fans put in and the amount of noise they always make. And hopefully yesterday was a nice reward before we get back to the league, and hopefully the first of a few away wins in the second half of the season rather than the only one of the campaign. Although I will just say quickly, and Sam will attest to this, in a group chat that I'm in with him after we drew Brentford away, given their impeccable home record and our terrible away record, I did say that our only away win of the season is coming at the G-Tech, where we'll go and win 1-0 based on Sod's Law. And it happened. So yeah, hopefully I'm not right about that being the only one of the season. But yeah, superb, great scenes.
Before we go any further on the limbs that you mentioned the away end, we do want to pass on our best wishes and hope for a speedy recovery to Argyle fan Graham Bell, who unfortunately was caught up in the limbs in the away end yesterday and actually suffered a very nasty injury to his head area. It certainly looks like on the pictures that are going around on social media. So Graham, if you are watching, or if somebody is watching who knows Graham, do pass on our best wishes from all of us here at Argyle Life. And a speedy recovery. Just maybe be a little bit mindful of celebrations in future. By all means, get carried away, but just be mindful of who's around you at the time. Adam, we're going to backtrack very quickly before we move the subject on, because we have a huge amount to talk about tonight. When that team sheet came out before the game, I think many eyebrows were probably raised. What did you make of it, first of all? I mean, my exact words in our group chat, I'm happy to live on this and die on the sword on this, were we're getting destroyed, particularly when I sent through the Brentford team sheet. Nance is a tactical genius, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's the first coach to heed my call of playing Victor Palsson as the central centre back. So I mean, my head was massive when that team first came through and we knew where he was playing. Oh my god, you could not get me out of the pub. But I think you are probably correct in the sense that seeing that come through and thinking, okay, there's been a bit of rotation here on both sides, granted, but particularly in our case, Caleb Roberts starting as well, who I think had a brilliant game, but was a surprise to see him in the lineup. And we, never would have felt in the hour that we were able to lay our glove on them, and how wrong we were at that point. I mean, as John said, when that team, which is not our first team, I imagine our team at the end of January is going to look very different regardless. But that team put in the perfect away display. We've gone to a side with so much more resources, so much more talent in their team than ourselves, and that they had no clear-cut chance at all. I think that I saw the stat of 0.4 xG through the entire game, which for one of the best attacking sides at home in the Premier League is remarkable. It's completely remarkable. I know, obviously, there's the argument that it's not Brentford's most important game, and they had Rico Henry and Carvalho coming back from injuries, and maybe they're not going to go into the tackles. But you'd still expect us to have enough, as you say, Joe, based on the team that we put out and the eyebrows that were raised. And yeah, it's just absolute genius from the management team. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, a lot of us being told that, Wayne Rooney needs a break. Nobody in the world could get more out of this squad than Wayne Rooney at this moment. He's completely unlucky. Absolute nonsense, as I think yesterday has proved. Yes, the players will have had a rocket up the backside. Yes, there's been a few come back, but for a team like that to show what we've been missing all season, to go away to Brentford and put in the perfect away display, it's hats off to each and every one of them out there, both on the bench and on the field. Oh, it was absolutely fantastic.
On the bench and on the field, let's talk about those on the pitch then. I gave you all advance warning of this discussion earlier on because I felt it would be wrong to just spring it upon you now. You needed time to think about who you wanted to pick out. The caveat to this is, and I sent this in a tweet to Argyle last night when they asked for us all to vote for the man of the match, it feels incredibly brutal to be singling individuals out yesterday because each and every one of them gave possibly in some case, well, certainly in some cases, the performance of their Argyle careers yesterday. Sam, I'll give you the starting point. Who would you like to eulogise about?
Before I do, I need to reply to this comment from the ever commenting Richard, who is a keen watcher of the pod, saying that I look like I've had a night out with Rooney. Richard, this is the one time I'm doing the pod not hungover. I was in bed before midnight last night. Normally, I come on hanging out on my backside and nobody noticed a thing. This is the one time I'm completely sober on this pod. So clearly, I need to get drunk more often, Richard. Anyway, so my one player that I've made John laugh. My one player that I'm going to be giving my praise to is perhaps not the player you might think, given the social media eulogizing. I'm going to give it to Caleb Roberts. I think he really grew into the game enormously. I don't think he was, bad at any point in the game, but I think there were times in the first 15, 20, he looked a little bit maybe, in the headlights, perhaps a little bit loose with his passing, but he really grew into it. He really began to find his place in the game, began to find his passing a little bit better. And in the second half, when Argyle stepped up their level of performance around the start of the second half, and then after that, when we wrestled control back after Brentford had their little dominant spell, Caleb Roberts is fantastic. His mentality, his attitude is absolutely everything you want from a young player. He presses brilliantly. He doesn't just press, like bull out of a china shop. He presses cleverly. He knows when a player is having a little bit of a wobble on the ball. He's right in there, yapping away at that player to get the ball back. He sees a good pass. He knows where the space is on the pitch. He intercepts well. He covers ground well. His brain is, in my view, his best attribute. And his passing did improve a little bit as the game went on. Not that it was bad, but it was maybe a little bit loose in the first half. Second half, he really found the ball he was looking for a lot better, as well as an absolutely fantastic performance off the ball. And seeing him mature as a player and seeing that performance in central midfield that was both not only cerebral and clever, but also incredibly hardworking and energetic, reminded me of Adam Randall's trajectory and Adam Randall's improvement. And I know that I'm sure a lot of people who watch this play Football Manager, when you select a player to mentor another player, I wonder if Kevin Nancekivell selected Adam Randall to mentor Caleb Roberts, because it certainly looked like it in that game. And I think if this is the standard he can show, in only his probably fourth or fifth start for the club, if that. What a player! And he's still only, by the way, 18. He's still not even old. He's still very much I think he might be 19. I'm not sure, but he might be 19. But he's very much a teenager still. What an amazing player he could be if he develops right. And let's hope he does.
I thought certainly on the radio he took a lot of praise yesterday, Caleb Roberts. And one of the things that came across on the radio was it sounds like he was putting himself about quite a lot in that midfield yesterday afternoon. He was getting really stuck in, which perhaps one or two times when we've seen him play in the past has been one of the criticisms, that perhaps he didn't get involved as much as you'd have liked to have seen him. So very much it sounds like it was a coming of age game yesterday for Caleb Roberts. John, I'm going to come to you next because it's fairly obvious where Adam's going to go with his praise. I think people don't need too much working out to know that. Who are you singling out?
I just wanted to quickly say in response to Sam's point, and also I think one of the points that Adam made earlier about squad strength, one thing I thought was absolutely incredible is that as the game went on, their team on paper got stronger because they threw on, Wissa and Umbermo. And our team, I don't want to say got weaker because that'd be harsh on the substitutes, but, like players who started for us and normally do start for us came off. It was Roberts and JB. I mean, Randall's pretty much been never present in that midfield, right? And we took him off. So our team, don't want to say got weaker per se, but like it wasn't like we were getting stronger and bringing our big hitters off the bench. And yet that was the part of the game where we still managed to turn the screw. And Roberts was a big part of that, I think. But the player I'll single out, before I do single a player out, I just want to say that the entire back three yesterday were phenomenal. Each of them had the game of their lives, I would say. Plekwasuelo, that header to deny, I think, Wissa, who was closing in at the back stick from that lovely little floated Burmo cross, really brave defensive header, stopping a certain goal. Galloway, I gave a 10 out of 10. I think I gave him the man of the match award in my ratings. He was absolutely everywhere while he was on the pitch, blocked everything, got his head on everything. Sensational performance. But the player I'm going to single out is the other one, Victor Paulsen, whose name has, I think it's fair to say, become something of a punchline in Argyle fan circles. He has taken a lot of criticism since signing for us in the summer, including on this podcast, and I think rightly so, because I think some of his performances have been woefully subpar. Now that there has been some discussion, Adam mentioned it, Dan Ellard is another evangelist of this position, that Paulsen has been treated a little unfairly in the sense that he's been played out of position. Obviously we've seen him on the right of a back four. We've seen him, I think, on the right of a three-man back three at least once. I think Bristol City away, that was where he played, if I remember correctly. Rather than, where we saw him yesterday, which was in this sort of anchor position, the centre of the back three, the old kind of Dan Scarr role from the end of last season. And I think that is a mitigating factor, although number one, I think one of his strengths is he's supposed to be a utility player, and number two, so you'd expect some kind of flexibility and versatility. And number two, I think some of his performances have just been way off it. Rightly or wrongly, he's obviously come to be sort of associated with some of those aforementioned absolute hammerings away from home. And I believe until yesterday, Argyle had not won a game that he has started. I think he may have come off the bench potentially in one of the home wins that we've had this season. Yesterday, he was like a different player, like a totally different player. There were a couple of dicey moments. There was that one ball that was played kind of in behind him for Sharda in the first half, where I think Paulsen was looking at Hazard to rush out and Hazard stayed, and Paulsen kind of, had, I think let Sharda get in behind him. In the end, it didn't really turn into a good chance or anything like that. So it wasn't a flawless display by any means, but he put his body on the line like the rest of them did. Cleared the ball so well. Something that's really frustrated me about Argyle recently, particularly in the sort of late Rooney era, is we were the worst team I'd ever seen at clearing the ball. Just like every time we tried to clear it, we would scuff it or it would go straight out to one of their players. Now, yesterday, the feet were being put through balls, and Paulson, I think, really exemplified that. There were some excellent clearances he did. One thing's in the air. And I think what most typified his performance was, there was one, I think it was when Randall blocked the shot from the edge of the box from, I can't remember who it was now. Might also have been Wisser, actually, I think, just after he came on. That is a brilliant Randall block where he flew in. And the first person you see racing out of the out of the box to basically pull Randall up and slap him on the back is Paulson. He's sort of hollering at him. He looked like he was, orchestrating the back line out there. It looked like he was leading. It looked like he was, fully in. Whether this is people who want to play for the new manager who was watching from the stands, or whether it was just kind of Nancekivell and Edwards rallying them, or whether it was a one-off. This looks like a confident football team now, increasingly over the last 3 games. A team that was clearly utterly bereft of confidence now looks like a confident team. Again, clearances are going out, rather than players turning and sniping at each other or shrugging at each other. It's vocal kind of barking. Come on, let's all do this together. I thought Paulson exemplified all of that yesterday. I thought he was absolutely outstanding, and I really hope the punchline Victor Paulson from the first half of the season is now a memory, and that we're going to, get some more absolutely top performances out of him under the new manager. And now I'm going to stop talking because my voice has given way, as you can hear. Yeah, you're on mute, Joe. Again. How do you do this every single week?
It's getting beyond a joke. For sure, I take your points on board, and we will be talking a little bit about for sure by the end of the next hour. Adam, on screen, VW Coco says Burnley are interested in Whittaker again. Sam's already let the cat out of the bag. Peter O'Rourke suggesting that he understands Burnley have made a bid for Morgan Whittaker. We can read all of that in your wonderful Transfer Centre blog at some point tomorrow. However, you want to talk about Morgan Whittaker, the player that we saw yesterday.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would also have spoken about my favourite Icelandic centre-half as well, but I think John's done a very good job of conveying my thoughts. So, yeah, I think this is rumour, and rumour being the key word at this point. It's not the first time we've seen Burnley bid for Morgan Whittaker, but with the player that we saw yesterday, I think is the one that we all knew was there, and we're all desperate to see again and again and again as we get to the end of the season. Because yes, okay, they've defended it poorly. Yes, okay, you should know that giving Morgan Whittaker space on the edge of the box like that on his left foot is a bad idea. But we don't have another player who can do that. If we were going to win that game, it was going to have to involve Morgan Whittaker stepping up to the plate and delivering. And Morgan Whittaker stepped up to the plate and delivered in an incredible way. And it really pleased me, actually. I know it's not been to a similar level, but I think much as the reasons for Paulson's performance being particularly pleasing were exacerbated by the fact that he's taken a lot of stick in this campaign, and whether it's all been fair or unfair, we could debate for a while. But Whittaker's also had plenty of unfair stick this season for reasons that we've covered a lot and don't need to go over again. But I like to think that as another one of those, I guess, 2 fingers up to the haters moments of yeah, I am the sort of player who can drag this team forward. I am the sort of player that can take a game by the scruff of the neck and win it. And I mean, yeah, as we've all mentioned, he gets the goal, and when that goal goes in, it's an incredible moment for all of us. And I think it's best to put it this way, that this isn't the first time, and I would like to keep my fingers crossed that it's not the last time that Morgan Whittaker will provide these moments like this. He's been that sort of player ever since he first joined us in that League One loan spell in the promotion season, and it was fantastic to see it once again. And to see it once again in a game like this, yeah, a brilliant time. I think, having heard Thomas Frank's interview afterwards, I think he's a bit frustrated with his side for letting it happen, as it were. But I think the alternative is that if it's any other player on the pitch, then your defence isn't necessarily thinking too bad. You're almost encouraging him to shoot from there. Morgan Whittaker ain't like that. He's He hit his heights superbly a year ago. He hasn't quite hit them, but has still been a very effective footballer since then. If he can start hitting those heights again, and we do indeed keep him around, I'll be a very, very happy man.
Archie Farmer has just brought it to our attention that Fabrizio Romano, do you remember him from Friday, has just tweeted he understands Burnley have officially tabled a bid for Whittaker.
Yeah, it's
He
not
was
the first
top
time
of
Fabrizio said that about him either.
No, very true. He was top of their
worth
hit list at
noting
the end of
he's
the
still
summer.
not. Worth noting, Fabrizio has not given any indication the bid has been accepted, so still
No.
negotiation stage, clearly.
And I suspect that whatever the bid is, it will have come off the fax machine and straight into the shredder. Let's quickly. One thing I did want to do at this stage actually was I wanted to gauge. We've been showing as many comments as we can about people who you guys at home watching live have suggested as the man of the match. So I actually just wanted to dip my toe into Passotti on this as well, because they regularly run a poll at the end of every fixture about asking who the man of the match is, and there's quite a wide range of votes coming in here. And actually, the man of the match that they've given it to, and there's been 240 votes so far on their poll, hasn't actually been mentioned yet, and that was Barley Mumba, who got another load of praise yesterday from Rob Green in particular. Victor Paulson picking up 48 votes, Julio Pleguezuelo picking up 33, Matty Sorinola 39, just going down the thread that they've got on there. Muttley Marvel, every player putting a shift and stuck to their jobs. Mill 511, pick one from Hazard, Pleggy, Sorinola, Mumba, Galloway and Paulson all played really well. Mumba was up for the game today, all played well. The back five were immense. Choose Barley, defended really well, carried the ball forward whenever he got the chance. Beidou looks very good. Give it to Paulson. Stepped up when we needed him. We don't win without the two early saves from Hazard, but I'm giving it to Paulson after the stick he's taken. And then who else we got? This truly was a game where the whole team deserved man of the match. And last but not least, let's take Olive Green, who sums it up pretty well. Barley for me, but everyone did well. Whittaker was back helping defend the right flank, not just scoring the goal. The players seem to really want to play. And that's the point, isn't it? You know, Adam Randall is another one who deserves a huge amount of praise by all accounts. Rob Green said he was immense when he came off yesterday. There's the block. It's an unbelievable block. Rushing out off the ground already, rushing out, throwing his body in the way and deflecting it out for a corner. John, I'm teeing up the emotive subject, so make this point quickly while your voice still holds.
I just really I know we were supposed to take only one player each, but I don't think Callum Wright has been mentioned literally at all on this podcast or in that thread beyond, everyone was good. And I think it's worth mentioning because Callum Wright has taken a lot of stick as well at this level. Obviously, Argyle fans have very fond memories of him from the League One title winning campaign. But I think at this level, he's not proved himself consistently. I think it would be fair to say. Obviously, the last time we saw him in an Argyle shirt was him lunging into an absolutely moronic challenge at Coventry and getting himself banned for 3 games. I thought he was absolutely brilliant yesterday against a Premier League team. He opened up little pockets of space. That shimmy inside for that shot that he had in the early doors was a phenomenal piece of skill. Fantastic cross for Sorinola to head over at the back post in the second half. Just a beautiful arcing delivery. Don't want to go on too much because, again, we were only supposed to take one player each, but I think he deserves his due. And, I will admit that often I've thought maybe he just isn't quite good enough for the Championship. Yesterday, he went to a Premier League team and mixed it up and proved that he is, or at least can be. Hopefully we can get that kind of consistency from him going forward. If he is, a couple of rumours on social media about him leaving the club. Find that a little bit hard to believe. If he started yesterday, it would suggest at least that a move is not imminent. If he does stay, if he can play like that, he's going to be an important player in the running. I thought he was another one who was absolutely magnificent yesterday and worth mentioning.
I mean, Morgan Whittaker started yesterday, but now we know there's a bid been tabled. Rosa Kernes on YouTube saying Callum Wright's crosses into the box were sublime. Again, we've all seen the cross for Sorinola's header in the second half. It's an unbelievable ball. I'm not using this as a negative on Sorinola. It's just an area I think he can improve on. I think if Joe Edwards is running onto the end of that cross, I think we score earlier. I think Joe Edwards probably buries that. But let's tee it up then, because a lot's been mentioned about the whole squad being man of the match and how much they were playing, how much they've stepped up, particularly the last 3 games, in particular the last 2, which have been outstanding, particularly defensively, structure, shape-wise, playing for the badge, etc. It's all been because of Joe Edwards, but most definitely Kevin Nancekivell in the dugout. And Rob McNichol has written the most powerful and emotive piece on Kevin Nancekivell on the Argyle website. If you haven't seen it yet, do check it out. And we have all seen that unbelievable video of Kevin Nancekivell being ushered over by Darko JB and Michael Beidou towards the away end yesterday. He didn't want to go on his own. He was beckoning everybody else forward. He didn't want to be the centre point of attention. He didn't want to be the figurehead. But Kevin Nancekivell wore his heart on his sleeve, as he has done in all 15 games that he has taken caretaker charge of Plymouth Argyle. We have only lost 4 of the 15 games that Kevin Nancekivell has been involved in as a caretaker manager. The passion that he showed at full time yesterday, if you did not have a tear in your eye, then your heart is made of stone. It was such a powerful image. It's a free for all this. Kev, if you're watching, we love you. And my own personal piece on this is Aaron actually copied my message in the group chat. He tweeted it from the Argyle Life account. Plymouth Argyle Football Club will never, ever be able to repay Kevin Nancekivell for all of his service at the football club. We are forever in his debt. Lads, let's give 10, 15, 20 minutes to Nance before we go to quickfire questions, because the guy's just a legend, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, I'd love to give 20 minutes to him. I don't know what there is to say that we haven't said already, in the sense that he's just a bloody legend, isn't he? What else can you say? He's had every. He's been with this club through pretty much every step of the journey you can possibly think of. He was in the coaching setup under Carl Fletcher and Romain Lario. It's worth noting that he was the one that, although I think he bumped him down to the youth team, he was the one that John Sheridan did keep around the club. Despite getting rid of pretty much almost all of Carl Fletcher's staff, apart from Kevin Nancekivell. Then I think under Derek Adams got promoted back up towards the first team again, didn't he? And he was, of course, trusted to take charge of that incredible final game of the season at home to Scunthorpe, the famous Josh Morris game, which we won despite that egregious bit of cheating from him. Ryan Lowe very much kept him around the first team, as did Stephen Schumacher, and obviously with alongside Neil Dewsnip stepped up in that incredibly emotive run over Christmas last year when Schumacher got poached by Stoke, and then even more emotive run in the end of the season when Ian Foster was sacked. I mean, factoring all that in, 4 incredibly, emotional spells of management, one being right at the bottom of the Football League, one being at the bottom of League One, and then 2 in the Championship. We kind of thought surely he won't have another spell as caretaker manager, but he did, obviously, alongside this time. It's I think fair to say that in the 2 spells last season, he was very much the junior partner to Neil Dewsnip. I think now he's very much the senior partner with Joe Edwards helping him. And you can't say any better than 2 draws and 1 extraordinary win. Well, obviously you can. 3 wins would be better, but that's just me being pedantic. He's done an incredibly good job in the time in the team. And I think I was almost as happy for him as I was for the team in general. But when he ran over again, like I said in my match rundown, it was just an absolutely incredible moment. I think everybody was welling up. Everybody was incredibly happy for him, not just the team in general. And it wasn't even just the fact he came over; it was the fact that all the players made sure he went over. Even JB and Beidou, JB's a loanee and Beidou's only got it this week. But despite that fact, both of those 2 knew how much Kevin Nancekivell means to his football club, how much the fans love him, and I think how much the players love him as well. And you still see people in the comments saying, give him the job full time. But for one, he said, as Joe will always say, he said he didn't want it. But I almost feel that it's like, I'm going to go into my crazy analogy again now. Like sometimes people say, if you're best friends with someone, you don't want to go into a relationship with them because you couldn't ever get the friendship back if it failed. Maybe I kind of wonder on that same token, maybe we wouldn't maybe want Nance to be manager, because if it ever failed, we wouldn't then, or if he ever got poached and went elsewhere, we wouldn't ever get back the incredible relationship we have with him now as a coach. Maybe could be thinking that a bit, thinking a bit too Ian Holloway about that, maybe in terms of wacky relationship analogies. Well, that's his cup of tea rather than mine. But I don't know. I'm rambling on. But if he ever did get the job full time, I think there would nobody who would get more support and more patience from the fans than him. But I think that no, absolutely not previous experience. No, but I just think that nobody would have more of a would have more of a love from the fans than him. But as it is now, he'll no doubt stay as a coach under Miron Muslic, and long may his association with Plymouth Argyle continue.
John, very quickly.
I think Sam has just friend zoned Kevin Nancekivell on.
I think he has.
Podcast.
Yeah. No offense, Kevin, if you're listening. It's
I'm sure I can make you reconsider.
And that will never change.
John, I'll quite openly admit I had tears in my eyes at full time yesterday. My work colleague who was alongside me will quite happily testify to that. Those tears kept streaming when I saw the videos of Nance at full time, celebrating with the fans and all the praise. And it's a wider football praise that's come in on that video that Argyle put out of Nancekivell celebrating, people commenting on how lovely it is to see the reaction of the supporters. You are another one who has carried his emotions publicly before. You admitted you cried after Leicester. You sent us all a very famous now meme in our group chat of you crying after the Hull result before you boarded the train to party with Divine. There must have been tears in your eyes at full time yesterday.
There was, and it actually the tears came when Nancekivell ran over and did the slip and then the come on. It was just such an incredible moment. And it was an incredible moment looking down on it from the stands, where he was relatively far away from us, so you can sort of just make out that he's absolutely thrilled. And obviously, you can see him doing the fist bump and all the rest of it. But it's only when you watch it back on video from close up that you can see he's crying as well. His bottom lips wavering even, and he, has clearly got tears in his eyes as he's going up to the fans. It's just which set me off when I watched it last night on the bus home.
There's the lovely moment on Match of the Day, isn't there, with his interview with John Akers, BBC Radio Devon's John Akers interviewing him for Match of the Day afterwards, which is lovely in its own right.
Yeah.
But that lovely line that John Akers that asks him that, are you really holding back the emotion right now?
Yeah, and I think it's it was just such a very lovely moment in the ground. The interview is a lovely moment as well, and it's just great to see him get his moment in the sun nationally, right? Like, people don't really know who he is. Outside of Plymouth, and I guess why would you, unless you're a massive anorak about other clubs' first team coaches or whatever. But to get that recognition from the wider footballing community, obviously I'm sure it will be a fleeting thing, but he really, really deserves it. He is, as we've for all the reasons that Sam has said and so many other people have said, one of the game's genuinely good characters. Football needs way more people like him in it, and it's great to see. I felt a little bit sorry for Joe Edwards actually, because on Match of the Day, they just mentioned Nancekivell as the manager, and they didn't note that Edwards has been in joint caretaker charge. It actually felt like he was not quite getting his due. But then it made me think, Nancekivell has actually, I guess, been in that position before. You mentioned that when he's been in caretaker charge, we have a really good record, and we do. But I guess he was sort of eclipsed by Dewsnip the last time around, because technically Dewsnip was the more senior partner. There was that quote that we referenced, I think, recently on the pod, where rather than saying, well, basically Dewsnip said, me and Nance are sort of joint caretaker managers, but then when pushed, it was like, Dewsnip said, well, I'm the senior partner. I guess I'm more in charge than he is. So I guess, any sort of national plaudits for keeping us up probably, rebounded more onto him than Nancekivell. And then, obviously Sam mentioned the previous occasion with the Scunthorpe game, where we played brilliantly and got that win that we needed to have any chance of staying up, but we didn't stay up. So, Nancekivell's not going to get his moment in the sun for that, because ultimately, through no fault of his own, and a large part of Josh Morris's fault, that objective was not achieved. So, it's just, it is a little bit unfair on Joe Edwards to not get the Match of the Day plaudits, but for Nancekivell to get them is just great. I feel so made up for the bloke. I'm sure he probably feels kind of embarrassed about the whole thing, and will be happy to recede into the periphery of the limelight, I guess. But yeah, he's a legend, as you said, and he's approaching, I guess, job for life status, right, at Argyle, I'm guessing at this point. And I'll end, by the way, just by showing people my phone background as of this morning. So yeah, that'll say everything else. But for audio listeners, I've changed my phone background to Nancekivell nearly falling over with one fist elevated, saluting the away end.
Just to quickly add on Joe Edwards, I did watch his post-match interview on Argyle TV. It was him who they interviewed. I think Nance is off doing national media, so Argyle TV interviewed Joe. And he one of the points he made, which kind of relates to something we've spoken to before on this podcast, is the extent to which he is really committed to that coaching pathway with Argyle, even though so much has changed around the club since he first went on that pathway. A new first team coach, probably soon to be a new director of football. The people kind of even higher up than that at the club, clearly the CEO, the chairman, all, the head of recruitment, all really rate Joe Edwards highly enough that he's going to continue on that coaching pathway. Then he said, excuse me, he found it a little odd in the sense that he was going from being a peer to these players to coaching them, but that was part of the transition of what he had to manage. And he said to the players, as much as I'm loving being here, I'd much rather be out there on that pitch with you. So I think that's very important to note as well. And again, it comes to the point where I know John's raised the point of people talk about Joe Edwards like he's too old, but I think the part of that is he very much has clearly given many indications that he wants to go on the coaching pathway with Argyle. If it does get to the point where he's no longer good enough for the Championship, which may come in a year or two, who knows, then he's got to make that decision of if he's going to go and play at a lower level where he can still play, somewhere in maybe League Two or wherever it may be, or would he just retire on a high and become a full-time coach? I honestly think he would do the latter. I think he'll finish his career with Argyle. I really do, the way it's going. And if we go down to League One, which is still very possible despite the recent improvements, then I certainly think he'll still be a very good League One player if it comes to that.
Adam, I apologise because I'm going to make this a brief point for you, but I am going to give you most of the quickfire questions, which we're going to rattle through very shortly, because we do only have 12 more minutes or so before Scott Coyne, Belgium football expert, joins us to discuss Miron Muslic's appointment at Argyle. Do continue to get your questions in. I've got as many for John as I possibly can, but more the better. Adam, this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question to you. Has a first-team coach ever been given a testimonial?
Or a statue, or a statue for that matter.
I suspect there would be if such a thing was to happen, there would be an incredibly long list of people who would be willing to give up their time to honour Nance.
Yeah, and serious demand from the rest of us, because I think no one can say a bad word about the guy. And I think we've been fooled almost by certain characters who claim they've bought into the club ethos and claim that they love Plymouth Argyle and would never want to work anywhere else. Not mentioning any names, of course. But with Nance, I think you can very much tell that is the case. And I think it kind of relates to what John was mentioning earlier, that the reason it makes us all emotional, one of the reasons it makes us all emotional, is he's an emotional guy as well. And you can see that, the tears in his eyes, he's come forward. It's not the first time. Kevin Nancekivell was quite tears of joy over Plymouth Argyle. I remember after that whole game, being in what was then the Green Taverners bar, and he came up to give a speech there and couldn't get through it because he was just so emotional about it. And some people can put that on. He's not. He genuinely cares. And I think there was a comment, actually, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who sent it through, but it said a lot, I think, that Wayne Rooney himself put out a post on Instagram speaking incredibly highly of Kevin Nancekivell. I don't think with anybody else in football it would be able to court that much respect, that they'd be getting so much praise from their predecessor, who was ultimately removed from the job, and they took over for them. And it just goes to show how much he's loved. And yeah, I know I said it when Muslic was announced, that with regards to the backroom staff question, the only really thing I want to see is I want to see him get his own team in as long as Kevin Nancekivell stays around. I think it's especially the case now because it's very much job for life territory, as has already been mentioned. I just love the guy.
I absolutely agree. Kev, you're going nowhere. We will put you in lock and chains if we have to. Right, 10 minutes. Quick fire question round. 2,000 people are live with us right now. If you are sticking around, and I do hope you do, because it's going to be a very interesting hour ahead as we look ahead to the future under the stewardship of Miron Muslic, who starts work officially as Plymouth Argyle's new head coach tomorrow. Press conference at some point tomorrow afternoon, I understand, as well. So he will be looking to, we will be all looking to that to get some snippets of information. Let's go through the questions that I've got starred then. Daniel Rauch, as many comments have been, have you guys seen about Burnley and Whittaker? Yes, we have. We were trying to avoid it as best we can, but Sam let the cat out of the bag there. Andrew Baum says, come on, you Greens, anyone seen that Pleggy could be leaving? I think it's Jose Pleguezuelo, the former Swansea City defender, who might be leaving, not Julio Pleguezuelo, who's never played for Swansea City. I think that's a bit of a gaffe, shall we say, by yet. Gary Parker, was Bundu offside? We're not doing a ref watch because it feels the wrong time to do a ref watch.
But to be clear, he wasn't. He definitely wasn't. No way he was in the eye line.
We're not doing a ref watch. Adam, while you're unmuted, do the club cash? Well, let's talk about it very quickly. Do the club cash in on Whittaker or spend the month batting away Burnley? Because Burnley aren't going to be the only club that are going to be interested.
No, and it depends on the extent of the offers. And as I've mentioned before, these are just rumours at this point. I know that I fully believe that a bid has been made, but that doesn't mean that we're going to accept it because we had exactly the same conversations at the end of at the end of August. It never happened. So it's an age-old conversation. I think it's something that has been said in the past. There's a difference, of course, between wanting a player to stay and wanting to sell for value. If we get an offer that completely blows anything out of the water, then I think it would make sense to allow Muslic then to invest that money in the squad. But if they don't meet our valuation, then hey, I mean, you're not speaking to a guy who's going to be disappointed that Morgan Whittaker stays. So it's a bit of it depends on the fence answer to the question, but it's all about the offer and whether it's enough, which, to be clear, is not going to be anywhere below 8 figures for me to even contemplate wanting to do anything.
I'm going to very quickly interject and say that my WhatsApp has been lighting up at the moment with comments, and I have been led to believe by somebody who does know a few people at Argyle. I'm not going to go into names. I'm not going to go into exact figures. I have been led to believe that the bid Burnley have made falls significantly short of Argyle's valuation, so he will not be going.
Wait, what? Burnley have made a derisory offer for Morgan Whittaker. That is the first. You're telling me that for the first time.
I've been led to believe by a well-placed contact that Burnley will need to seriously up their bid if they are going to get Morgan Whittaker. To give my view on it, I think it's great to see him back to form. It's great to see him back confident. It's great to see him scoring goals again. I do just wonder, and maybe I'll change my mind on this after we talk to Scott, whether with the focus on gegenpressing, he is the most suited to the new style. And I do wonder if we could maybe get an offer around the ballpark of 10, 11 million, maybe that's cashing in when the stock is at its highest. So if they've offered below that, which I'm led to believe they have, I think certainly the club are right to decline it. But with his form being a bit patchier this year, not quite such luck of the Robin agreement of finishing, and with the style maybe not being the most suited to him, I think if we get 8 figures, my personal view is I would, with thanks to incredible memory, say I would accept that bid, but we'll see.
Presumably Burnley want him because their only way of scoring goal, their only tactic for scoring goals is give it to players who will shoot from 25 yards and occasionally the ball will go in the back of the net. Meanwhile, they'll concede 0 goals ever and win 1-0. Richard Sloman might enjoy this because I saw his seething contempt for Burnley in the comments, and always do enjoy a little bit of seething contempt myself. I'd say Burnley are not one of the many clubs that necessarily fall in that bracket for me, but Scott Parker as an individual absolutely is. And yeah, I don't. If you're him, I don't really know why you'd go there. They're not a team that play fluid, nice attacking football. They're not a team that play in a particularly ambitious way. They're a team that play very defensive-minded, safety-first football. I mean, it's not to say that the other sort of sparky attacking wide players don't get the opportunity to again try and shoot from 25 yards, which seems to be their main tactic for scoring. But I don't know. I think if I were him and I were looking to leave, which is purely speculative, I would be looking to go to a more exciting project than Scott Parker's Burnley, personally.
And on footballing aesthetics, we will be joined very shortly by Scott Coyne to talk about Miron Muslic's footballing aesthetics. Let's quickly rattle through a couple last questions. P321 man one. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but question for the lads: if we beat Liverpool, does that make us the best club in England? Well, I think it would probably make us the best club in Europe at the moment. But let's not forget.
Only if Nottingham Forest aren't top by then.
Yeah, very true. Let's not forget, whilst it is great about Liverpool, and maybe a little bit later on the lads will touch on it in a little bit more detail, we do have 5 games between now and that Liverpool tie. So whilst it's very exciting at the moment, there is still a lot of football to be played before then. Anon 1, how far away from fitness is Joe Edwards? He's all that's missing at the back. Couple of weeks was kind of the impression I was getting from Joe's post-match interview yesterday on Argyle TV. Of course, I'd imagine he's been more clipboard and whistle in hand than actually getting out involved in sessions the last 10 days or so. So whether or not that's setting back a little bit, who knows? And last but not least, if we've got time at the end of the chat between John, Sam and Adam with Scott, we'll come back to a couple of these questions. But last but not least, before we hand it over to John, P321 man 1 and Andy want us to touch on Adam Forshaw's departure to Blackburn very briefly. Just a 2-minute segment on this if we can. Blackburn have signed Adam Forshaw on a free transfer. Some deal that.
Yeah, can I just say, whoever his agent is, I want them running my life, please. I want them. They should be running a multi-million-pound company, because he must have a very good agent. That's what I'm going to say.
Anybody got anything to add on Adam Forshaw?
I mean, it's a deal that I the only worry, and I mean it's not a worry because I think he had to. It makes sense for him to go, particularly when he's got an offer like that, which he definitely hasn't earned. But the only worry is, of course, it's another body that we have to replace in depth. It's kind of, and I don't place them on the same level considering what they've done for Argyle, but it reminds me a little of Matt Butcher leaving last January, where it felt like, yeah, it makes sense to go, but we never really replaced him. I think Forshaw will be much easier to replace, but we've got to do it, and I hope the next 2 weeks bring in at least a midfielder or two.
We did touch on his departure briefly when it was rumoured in the previous podcast on Friday night, and obviously it's been confirmed since then. And I think this was said at the time, but I do want to reiterate, given the sort of raised eyebrows about him going to Blackburn, which I think are totally justified, that he's been a good servant to the club in the last year. He has had some good games. He was part of a team that obviously did stay up, and I just want to say thank you for his service to the club, and obviously we wish him well.
Aside my slightly sarcastic answer, I would also echo that statement.
It's just a shame, like with a couple of players that we've had in recent history, we just didn't get them a couple of years earlier, isn't it? It's just the way it was that we got them at that period of their career. Last but not least, and then I am exiting stage left before I keel over. Rosa Kernes asks, we've heard nothing of when TJ's coming back. Nance did say before the Brentford game, TJ is probably 3 weeks away, roughly 2 to 3 weeks away from coming back to fitness. Hey, who knows? He might terrorise.
That's some training though, so probably quite a longer time still before he can play, I would have thought.
I thought Nance said he's back in full training and it's 2-3 weeks away before he's back to playing.
I'm wrong.
If that is the case, maybe he will terrorise Virgil van Dijk on a Sunday afternoon at Home Park in front of the world. That's it. That's my section of the show done. I'm going off to take some tablets, some medication, drink a lot of water and try and get some sleep. Hopefully I will recover from whatever bout of sickness I've got for the last 48 hours very quickly. I'm going to blame it on the speed I ate those fish and chips, John, on Friday night, trying to get the emergency podcast out. 2,300 and rising quickly are watching us now live. You are about to go into an in-depth discussion with Belgian football expert Scott Coyne on what we can expect from Miron Muslic based on his time at Cercle Bruges and before. John Alsop, the ship is yours. Join me and the team again on Wednesday night post Oxford United. Until then, I'll see you all later.
to think John had a
You're
go
on
at
mute.
Joe for being muted, didn't he?
Yes, there we go. I've done it now as well. Brilliant. No words of wisdom from Joe, as he has been accustomed to doing recently on his way out. But we are still here. We are delighted to be joined by the aforementioned Scott Coyne, Belgian football expert. Unless I'm mistaken, that's an expert in Belgian football rather than a football expert who is Belgian. But Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a Belgian football expert before we get on to the matter that everyone wants us to talk about?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. What a delight to join you to talk about the brilliant and ever charismatic Miron Muslic. So I am part of the three-man team who produce the Belgian Football Podcast, which is the #1 English language podcast covering all of Belgian football. So we do a weekly show which covers all the news and action, and produce a variety of specials throughout the season as well, where we invite guests on from inside clubs to delve a little bit deeper into different aspects of Belgian football culture. So if you have an interest in Belgian football and English is your main language, then we're the place to come. And we've been doing that now for almost 5 years. And it's just kind of exploded for us. We're the only ones covering Belgian football in any degree of kind of depth from an independent point of view, because we're not one club specific. We're interested in everybody and everything. So you'll learn a lot about Belgian football very quickly with our podcast. So yeah, I'm one of the three-man team behind that, and exploding allowed me to set up my own Belgian football consultancy. So I do a little bit of work for players and agents and clubs from time to time as well.
Done it again. I'm not used to hosting, but I'm now off mute. Yeah, great. So obviously we have hired Miron Muslic. This was an appointment that came out of the blue. I'm not sure how closely you were following Plymouth Argyle Twitter on Friday, but everybody was extremely convinced that Steven Schumacher was coming back, who is not Belgian, despite his name sounding like it plausibly could be, I guess, much more German than that. But his name had been mentioned. I think Fabrizio Romano had already tweeted about him being a strong contender. But when we started our managerial search after Rooney was or parted ways with the club, he was not someone who was, I think it's fair to say, on anyone's radar among our fan base, and maybe some who follow European football very closely indeed may have heard of him, but I would say that I certainly had not, and that's probably true of the vast majority. So what's the kind of, I guess, elevator pitch for Miron Muslic, for those who aren't familiar with him at all? What are the most important things to know about him in your view?
Well, I think a lot of people were surprised when his name was mentioned. I mean, I first got some concrete news that this was very close to happening on Thursday. I spoke to Miron recently. I got to know him a little bit as well over the last few years through my work in the Belgian Football Podcast as well. I've been able to spend a little bit of time with him earlier in the season with some of Cercle Bruges' European qualifiers. So I'm lucky enough to know Miron a little bit as well. So I heard that some of these whispers that he was in the mix were a little bit more than whispers on the Thursday, and then obviously it was confirmed later on the Friday evening. I think the thing with Miron is when you Google his background, which I'm sure Argyle fans started doing probably quite early on the Friday, they would probably looked at this and thought, I don't really understand this. There's nothing there that's kind of getting my attention or getting me too excited. Why is his name in the mix? When you look at his background, he had a largely unremarkable playing career, which coaches. Good coaches don't necessarily make good players and vice versa. So that's not a reflection on him at all. I think he comes to Cercle back in October of 2021. He's brought to Cercle by somebody called Carlos Avina at that time. Now, Carlos Avina used to be Cercle Bruges' technical director. So he was in charge of all of the footballing operations at the club. And that summer, a few months prior to that October, Carlos met Miron at a training camp and was immediately impressed by him. Now, when I say impressed, I'm talking about his personality and his charisma. In truth, sometimes in football coaching, what's not in someone's CV, the personal details are often just as important, if not more important, than the actual CV details. And that's very much the case here. Miron's strengths and the things that have brought him, I think, to the forefront of people's minds during this recruitment process and ultimately led to him being successful and being appointed are the things that his CV can't really tell you. So just very briefly, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in more detail, he's an excellent man manager. He's particularly good at knitting together a really strong team dynamic. His media skills are very, very good. He speaks very well. He handles his media responsibilities very professionally. And as I was alluding to, he's got a lot of charisma. He's one of those people you immediately pay attention to when you walk into a room. And if you ever get the opportunity to meet him, watch out for his handshake. He's got an incredibly strong handshake, which kind of blew me away the very first time I met him. So I've been on the receiving end of experiencing that charisma and personality walking into a room, and I think that goes a long way in football because it rubs off on people, doesn't it? It rubs off on players positively, but also other people inside clubs, people who don't work necessarily on the footballing side, who are just as important. So there's a lot of factors here that have come together to make this happen. But obviously, his period at Circle was extraordinarily successful, and there are some similarities, I think, with where Argyle find themselves at the moment and where Circle were when he first came to the club, because the plan was always to make Miron the head coach of Circle at some point. When he first came to the club, he was what we call the T2 in Belgium, which is effectively the assistant head coach. But there was a long-term plan in place for him to become the T1 at some point, which he did in September of 2022. And it's at that point, really, that Circles start to go on, this kind of meteoric rise that's got a lot of people's attention, certainly those who've been kind of watching what's been happening in Europe.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say about his charisma. It's just so obvious to me. Me and my partner were discussing whether he had Riz or not, and the consensus was that he definitely does. The to use a 2024 term of art, the vibes are like really, really good with him. There's sort of intangible things maybe that you can't, as you say, quite identify on his CV. I want to talk a little bit about the style of football that he prefers. And we did a sort of a little bit of a dive into this on our podcast on Friday. So I'd encourage people to go back and rewatch or re-listen to that after this one is over if you want some more kind of data on his preferred style of football. But one thing, that I think you've seen Argyle fans saying is that they're a little bit concerned when they hear he has a direct style, because I think to a lot of English football fans that can translate as Tony Pulis ball, basically, right? Hoof, and then big striker tries to win it in the air. And I think that is something that is perceived as not being fashionable. That's not my understanding of what direct means in this case, but am I wrong? I mean, how would you sort of allay those concerns about that have come up, that we've heard about the sort of directness of his style?
Yeah, well, I think the term direct football is generally misunderstood by kind of most football fans. I think, what English football fans might understand as direct football is kind of quite different to what would maybe be described as direct football in different places in Europe. And it's not a kind of one-size-fits-all template. So Miron essentially likes to play what would be considered a kind of gegenpressing type game, and that's something that obviously comes out of German and Austrian football, and it's a high tempo aggressive press, at its simplest, which means that the side is going to look to squeeze the space as much as possible. And in Miron's case, what this means is squeezing the space in the opposition's final third as much as possible. So you might sit off a side a little bit. You might allow them to have the ball in areas that you might not expect. And there might be a series of inbuilt triggers, if you like, that are the kind of starter for when that press starts. So Miron sides like to press in that final third very aggressively. So you'll find that the wide men and the front men. Now, whether it's a lone striker or even if it's two up front, or in fact, if you're playing with a front three, it doesn't really matter in a way. They're expected to do an awful lot of work in this sense. So I think it's important to understand that doesn't necessarily mean punting the ball long from wherever on the park. It's a very coordinated approach, which has very definite triggers, and it's actually kind of quite tactical, because what it allows you to do is it makes it difficult for sides who do generally like some form of possession-based game to play through you as a side. It's very difficult for them to do that, because when you play some form of gegenpressing, a side tends to hunt in packs. So it requires a side to be fit and very coordinated and understand what those triggers are. But once people have a good understanding of their own role within that system, then that system can work very well for you once you're up to speed with it. So it's something that is still not massively popular in the game in the UK generally. I mean, there are some coaches that have brought their own variation of that over, because you can play, you can add your own element to that within that basic structure, and Circle have done that, because they use the gegenpressing template in-house there as a club. And although obviously they've changed coach recently, their new coach very much is a gegenpressing coach who puts his own spin in that. So there may be some different elements to it, but the basics of how that works remain the same.
Yeah, really interesting analysis. And I just want to again repeat, thank you so much, Scott, for joining us. I just in listening to what you said on other stuff, because you said, didn't you, when the news got announced, that you would be all over all the Argyle media podcasts, and you were as true as you were. I did listen in to you on Pilgrim's Pod earlier, just to make sure we weren't going over too much of the same ground. But one interesting follow-up question I had based on that was, you said on there that it wasn't quite a Red Bull style, but it was nearly a Red Bull style. So sort of following up on your last answer, what would be the differences, if you like, between Muslic's style and a, shall we say, more orthodox Red Bull gegenpressing style?
I think the most obvious difference is the aggression in the press with a Red Bull style applies all over the pitch. So it's only in certain areas of the pitch that press really comes into the forefront of the game with the way that Miron plays. So it might take a little bit of getting used to, I think, if you're not used to seeing a side playing like that. And some people in Belgium have accused Circle of being a little bit less entertaining to watch, which I've always refuted, I think, because I think when you see how the system works, you see there's a game plan in place there that actually is very effective. And what Miron did during his time at Circle was show that it could be effective, and he got very good results very, very quickly from it. I mean, in his first full season in charge, they pulled clear of relegation, which, to give people a little bit of context in Circle are quite a small club, and they've flirted with relegation for a number of years, coming up and down between divisions. And when Miron comes in, that's really the beginning of a period where the club starts to pull away from being a club that are very much in that mix on a repeatedly consistent basis. And with his work with Carlos Avina, they've made Circle a much more stable and consistent side, and one which now is not only looking to be mid-table regularly, but push for European places. And in that first full season, they narrowly missed out in European qualification. And then in the second full season, not only did they finish in playoff 1, which was a remarkable achievement in itself, that's the championship playoff, the top 6 sides, they actually qualified outright for Europe for the first time in what was 14 years for them. So the first time since 2010. So really quick results with this system, with a very young squad as well. It's worth pointing that out. You know, they've been the youngest squad in Belgium for 2 or 3 years now. And that's a deliberate thing as well, you know, to bring in very young talent and develop it and sell it on, obviously, hopefully for large fees, and then to reinvest that into the side. So I think you're going to see something similar. I'd be very surprised if you didn't in kind of the longer term model, obviously, going forward at Argyle now.
Absolutely. And again, before I just follow up on that question, I just really want to repeat what I said, or rather what John and Joe have said previously. For the people watching along, please do also pop up if you have any questions for Scott. This isn't just us. I know a couple of you already have, and we will come to you very shortly. But just one more thing for me, it would be, what sort of role does he see of certainly particular positions of the pitch? The main one coming to mind would be goalkeeper. I did see a stat saying that Bruges, Circle Bruges' regular goalkeeper had the most amount of long balls in the league and the fewest amount of short passes. So I appreciate you said it's a little bit more nuanced than being a direct style, but I guess in terms of that, it is direct at its core. There's not a lot of playing out from the back, I would imagine.
And just quickly, if I can jump in, not sure how familiar you are with our goalkeeping situation, but in the summer we signed Daniel Grimshaw from Blackpool, who is outstanding with his feet in order to pass out from the back, basically. But he has since lost his place in the side to a keeper who is a bit more of a, focus on shot stopping and command of area, and is okay at kicking long, but not necessarily going to sort of ping a raking pass into the channel or anything like that too regularly. So that's the kind of personnel that we have at the moment, just for context.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, as far as the goalkeeping position is concerned, specifically in the modern game, I would say no matter tactically whatever a coach's approach is, it's really important for a goalkeeper to be good with their feet, for general distribution purposes, first of all, but also when you consider the goalkeeper is the first line of attack, actually, really. Do you know what I mean? If you think about it, I mean, I know a lot of people don't see it that way, but in the modern game, they absolutely are, and they have a role there. And if you look at Cercle Bruges' first choice goalkeeper, who actually is injured at the moment, somebody called Varlason, who's actually Brazilian, under Miron's time at Cercle, Varlason was responsible for a number of direct assists that led to goals simply through what would be considered a direct long ball. So in order, starting that attack from the goalkeeping position to effectively create a one-on-one or to send somebody through is kind of very much part of that direct game. I would always caution against seeing that as against a negative, because it's about, I suppose, finding those areas on the pitch where you can be most effective, most quickly. And I think a lot of people who think of English football in terms of direct football, and Tony Pulis was mentioned earlier. In some regards, Tony was a man a little bit ahead of his time. He was trying to play what would be considered, a kind of gegenpressing model before anyone really knew what it was. And without even Tony knowing what it was, I think, which is kind of quite interesting. Maybe football history will be a little bit more kinder to him in due course. We will find out. But yeah, I mean, Miron will be looking for his goalkeeper to contribute to that. So don't be surprised to see how the goalkeeper operates and how he releases the ball to change a little bit now. But fundamentally, being good with your feet, regardless, as I was saying, of how a coach plays tactically, is always important. So whether it's through playing out through the back, or whether it's for looking for that free space further up the pitch in a much more quicker, direct way, and it, to me, doesn't really matter. It's about how you instruct the goalkeeper to use that distribution. And if you can get the ball to those offensive players quicker, then all the better, because you don't necessarily need to play through a side if you have the right players.
No, it's very interesting, and I think probably there are 100 more questions I could ask, but I'm conscious of your time, and I know we do have a few more listener questions to head back to, so I will pass back now to John to read out a few of the listener questions that we have. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Sam. Yes, the first question I'm going to flag up comes from Ad Cole. Question for the Belgian, that's not quite right. But anyway, do you think Muslic will take a long-term view, or could he also be a firefighter and hit the ground running? Obviously, this is a question of immediate relevance to us given our league position, but he has signed a 3.5-year deal. Obviously, we don't know how that's structured exactly, but it suggests that the club are really in trying to invest in this one for the long haul. And obviously, there is, a very good chance that we could go down this season, even if things do to some extent improve. Yeah, how do you see that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think he already has a plan in place. Having spoke to Miron a little bit last night, actually, amid his post-match euphoria, he does have a plan in place for how he sees the rest of this season. The main objective, obviously, is staying in the Championship, so that's the immediate priority, to stay there. And when Miron came into Cercle Bruges, funnily enough, Cercle were in a similar situation. They were in a bit of a dogfight at that point, and their objective was to stay in the division, which they managed to do. So first of all, Miron likes a challenge. He's not afraid of a challenge, and he's not afraid of this particular challenge and all of the pressure that goes with that. So I don't think coming in to a club not knowing these players and not having perhaps some of the players or kind of tools in terms of the playing squad that you might like to have ideally is going to bother him too much at the moment. I think it's about going in there and about his man management and getting the best out of these players. I think there are some very simple things that he can do quickly, particularly with the offensive players, in order to kind of shift the playing system immediately that can get some results. I think that win last night, I think helps that first training session tomorrow morning. I think it brings people in a good mood. I think it lifts the atmosphere in the camp a little bit as well after such a long period without an away win. So I think that helps. I think he will have a longer term view of how he wants to embed that system, and that will mean adding some of his own players, which is going to take time because obviously it's kind of too late now to impact that in this current transfer window because it's active, and that's been planned for a number of weeks, obviously. So he will know that the next window, obviously the summer one, is the one where players can be spoken about, which they will be already, I suspect, as to who he might like to add to the squad. But, you know, he's got sort of 20 plus games there to get to know that squad and to get a feeling for, to be blunt about it, who he fancies, who buys into the system, who he thinks is going to be able to meet those demands, and who just doesn't fit the profile tactically of where he wants to go. I think he sold a tactical plan to the club's hierarchy as well, which has obviously appealed to them, that he wants to put in place. And I don't think some people would see it as a kind of uphill challenge, obviously, it is going to bother him at all, because he does like a challenge and he has experience of a very similar situation. So I think that's going to stand him in good stead.
Yeah. We've had very sorry.
Come in on that one just
Sure.
just really quickly. I know I haven't spoken in the last hour. Just to repeat the message of thanks so much for coming on. This insight really is terrific. So appreciate that immensely. With it kind of links into what I was saying, but do you see him or Muslic having that ability when necessary to be adaptable? Because if we, just to provide a bit of context, we're coming off the back of something very similar happening last year when Steven Schumacher departed. Ian Foster came in and very, very quickly kind of ripped up the entire playing style, enforced his own needs, and for many, many a reason, the Foster era wasn't successful. And I think a lot of Argyle supporters are cautiously optimistic about Muslic coming in, and I certainly include myself in that. But there's a worry, I guess, that it's kind of once bitten, twice shy, and we could see another totally different style come in to what we're used to, and it's something that long term, I guess, we be encouraged with, but short term it's a case of do the squad fit that? So I know there's these 20 games to go in what we can describe as this firefight. Do you, from what you know from when he first came in at Cercle and obviously saved them the first time, do you think he has those adaptable traits that will allow him to be successful in the variety of situations that we'll find ourselves in?
The short answer to that is yes. And I think that's because he was playing under a footballing template tactically at Cercle, which he didn't have a great deal of choice in. And I think he knows in coming to England that although that is his preferred template and style, that form of gegenpressing, I think he knows that he is going to have to add in what would be considered, tactically speaking, kind of tweaks, just in order to adapt a little bit to the English game. Belgian football is is very physical. There's a lot of dueling, there's a lot of transitions, there's a lot of one-on-one battles all over the pitch in a way that isn't quite the case in England, I think. I was talking earlier about how he's very, very strong, I think, at knitting together a cohesive team dynamic, and that's going to be really, really important here. But I think he will allow some players a little bit of flexibility within that system. I mean, it's interesting this season. Cercle obviously have struggled a little bit. You know, the big prize of being so consistent last season and achieving European football was a difficult one for them, because what happened in the summer was they lost a number of key players, which they knew was coming. It was no surprise. To be fair, they replaced those players early in the window in the summer, but they were very young players that they brought in, as was expected. That was always the plan. It was always going to be the case. In fact, most of those players, I've got a list here, most of them are between 18 to 21. And when you have such a high turnover in players, bring in 6 at the beginning of the season, it's very difficult to ask them to replicate the same levels of consistency that the previous players had kind of set and achieved. So they struggled to kind of do that, and they also struggled with the demands of playing football twice a week, European football and domestic football, because young players are much more difficult to handle in a way. Getting them to play consistently and then getting them to play consistently with the demands of domestic and European football is actually quite a big ask. So from a logistical and a kind of tactical and strategic point of view, there were a number of challenges there that Miron hadn't had to deal with before, and that explains why the kind of form suffered and it led to his kind of departure. I think he will introduce some elements that we didn't see at Cercle. I mean, earlier on this season, when I was following Cercle and out watching them playing in Europe, what I saw was there were some elements that we hadn't seen in Miron's game before. And I think that was him trying some new things, because what had been working so successfully for them up to that point wasn't working quite as well with the new players. So I think he was trying to adapt to some of their strengths as well. And because he had no say in who was coming in, essentially, that was down to the technical director, somebody called Rembert Vermant now. Carlos Savina left to go to Monaco. Little aside here, Monaco owns Cercle, by the way. Monaco are owned by the Russian billionaire Dmitry Rublev, who also owns Monaco and Cercle. And there was a change of technical director. So there was a little bit of tension in the relationship there at Cercle, because the new players coming in, I think, weren't always necessarily to Miron's liking, and it was difficult to replicate the kind of previous success despite his best efforts. So I think you will see him being a little bit more creative, because more sides in the Championship than in the Belgian top flight, more games in a league season as well, slightly more. So I think he's going to come up against a greater variety of tactical styles as well. And that means you need a few more tricks in the box. So I don't doubt that we will see Miron's own coaching style develop a little bit here as well, because the demands of the English game are going to mean he's going to need to do that. And I think working with some of the staff there, rather than bringing his entire backroom staff of his own in, I think is going to be very useful for him, and is a good indication of how open-minded he is as a coach as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that, because we've had a number of questions on this sort of theme, and I'm going to ask these together because I guess it's kind of the same question but with different branches to it. Richard Sloman asks, is there a player or two Muslic might bring with him? We've had variations of this question that refer, I think, specifically to Cercle Brugge players, but also players just from the Belgian league more generally, or players that he might be known to like. That's one question. And then you mentioned his backroom staff. Tom Clark says he had 2 English coaches in the Cercle Brugge setup. Do you know who they are, and is it likely they will come to Argyle MS? Beyond the sort of specifics of those individuals, I guess the broader question that's also been posed a few times is, can we expect his backroom staff to follow him? Obviously, we have Kevin Nancekivell at Argyle, who's part of the furniture and comes with the club, but we have had a lot of turnover in the coaching staff. I don't think any other coaches from the Rooney era are still around. We're also missing a director of football at the moment, we're led to believe, although that's not yet been officially confirmed by the club. Yeah, well, what's the picture on those sort of personnel fronts, both playing and coaching?
I think, Miron, I know the plan is to be quite open-minded about this. I mean, it's still something that's being discussed. Miron didn't come into this with a big shopping list of demands in terms of what he wanted in terms of his coaching staff. So I think he's going to be happy to have a number of people there who know the club very well, for obvious reasons, and know English football a little bit more intimately than Miron does. It's always useful to have that effective go-between there. I think there are a couple of names to watch out for. Whether they're able to follow Miron to Devon or not will depend on a number of factors. There is somebody called Jimmy DeWolf. That is his real name. That isn't a nickname, who's been at Circle for a very, very long time, who in fact isn't English, but speaks very good English, who worked very closely with Miron, is still at Circle. There may be a conversation around Jimmy, and there is another coach who isn't English, who English football fans may know quite well, actually, somebody called Radi Jaidi, very well known for his time at Bolton. He's spent a good period of time at Circle, working with Miron as well. Radi left Circle a little bit earlier this season to go off and pursue some coaching opportunities of his own, and is now out of the game. Radi is available. That will be an interesting one, because obviously Radi has a lot of knowledge of English football himself, having spent a lot of time playing and living in England as well. So there are a couple of possibilities and names to watch out for. This is quite an interesting one, I think, because Miron had quite a big backroom staff at Circle. Belgian clubs like to have quite a big infrastructure in that sense as well. There's a lot of analytical staff there as well. But he's very open-minded about that, I think. So we'll just need to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But there are ongoing conversations as to who those individuals might be and who might be willing to come. Obviously, some of those people are still under contract as well. And I think in the case of Jimmy DeWolf, I think Circle might strike quite a hard bargain there, because he's quite highly valued there and has been at the club for a long time. So it might just depend on how much Miron wants to bring him with him. But I think it's a very positive sign for Argyle fans that Miron's very open-minded about that as well, because it means that there can be a much more kind of seamless transition as well. And I suspect that first training session tomorrow is going to be quite a fun one for the players once they get those firm handshakes that I was alluding to a little bit earlier on, and exposed to that charisma.
Yeah, just quickly, Sam has a party trick, which is if you name a date, he can say what the closest Argyle game to it was this millennium. Sam, to reverse the question a bit, what date did Radi Jaidi score the winning goal at Home Park, and for what football club?
4th of November 2006 for Birmingham City in a 1-0 defeat, in which Argyle were very, very dominant, and he scored from, I think, a corner kick. It was
it was a thumping header. I was there. I remember it well. And maybe we can get him into the back line, because we're missing a couple of defenders. Yeah, I guess that was a good
defender for sure.
That was the other part of the question. Then, playing personnel. Are there any players you would be unsurprised to see on his radar? Obviously, we should clarify that Argyle's recruitment is, we're led to believe, at least heavily driven by existing staff, and obviously there are players already coming in despite the managerial uncertainty. So I don't know exactly to what extent he'll have a say over transfers, but I imagine he will have some input, and if he does, who might we expect?
Well, I think there'll be discussions obviously ongoing around that. What I don't know myself, actually, even having spoken to Miron last night, was that I don't know the extent to which he's going to have any input yet onto that on a longer term basis. Often when there's obviously a technical director of football in place, usually the case is that they handle all of that. So although a coach will be involved in those discussions, they have effectively very little say in the final decision-making process around that. Their job is solely to concentrate on the coaching. They're given the raw ingredients, if you like, and it's their job to get the best out of that. That will probably be the case here, I would imagine, as well, because it's very much a European model that works very well in Europe, that always has done, but is starting to filter down into the English game much more effectively now. There are a couple of players at Circle who were very important to Miron, who are still there, who are still performing at a good level, and aren't part of the new intake over the last sort of 6 months or so. And that are club captain, somebody called Thibaut Summers, quite a young player, very important, spent his entire career at Circle. Really reliable player, can play in a number of positions, is very flexible, really stabilising figure within that camp as well, bit of a leader, very shy off the pitch, but very strong communicator and effective on it. He is somebody I think Miron probably would quite like to bring to Argyle. We'll see whether that's possible for him. And another player still at Circle who I think has been very important and I think would be quite good in the English game because of his physicality is centre-half Christian Ravic. He's another name that I think could come into the mix as well. Whether either of those players get fast-tracked and they pursue any options there, we'll just need to kind of wait and see. But I think Miron will already have identified the profiles of the type of players that longer term he wants the club to kind of focus on. So I'm sure certain positions will have been discussed because they're the ones that will have to be right if his system is going to embed and be successful at Argyle. So if you get them right, you will get an opportunity, I think, to build something kind of quite special.
Yeah, ideal. Scott, we're conscious of obviously you've been very generous with your time with us. We just have a couple more questions, if that's okay with you. Yeah. Just a Jana asks, serious question, will Muslic win away? As you may know, our away form until yesterday what has been probably the worst in the Football League. I think actually statistically has been the worst. We've drawn 3 league away games this season. We've taken a number of excruciatingly heavy defeats. I think a trio of 4-0s, 5-0, 6-1. Just since the beginning of the season. But this isn't just a Wayne Rooney problem. Argyle have historically travelled poorly. Obviously, there are reasons that have been posited for this, including the distances that Plymouth have to travel to get to away games compared to most other teams in the league playing within a more constricted geographic space. But Ian Foster, the very much maligned manager who Adam mentioned earlier, who came in this time last year and only lasted a couple of months, actually had a very good away record, or at least a good away record compared to other managers that we've had. It was really his home. Yeah, well, I think it was actually good. We can have this debate at a different time. Anyway, we won a couple of away games under him, having not won away up to that point in the league that season, and it was really his home form that let him down. Obviously don't have a crystal ball and we can't say for sure what will happen, but is there a realistic prospect that the way he plays or something about his managerial record or philosophy indicates to you that we might be able to see some more success on the road than we've had so far?
Yeah, I see no reason why not. And I think that's largely because of how smart a coach he is tactically and how he adapts to the opposition that he plays. I mean, your point actually there, you've already made one that I was going to bring up when you asked me that question around simply because of the geography of where Plymouth is and the makeup of the championship, and sides being spread out a lot. There's a lot of travelling and there'll be more travelling in the English game for a side like Argyle than there would for most Belgian sides. Belgium's quite a small country. It's quite easy to get around and that means that the travelling demands for a side like Cercle Bruges aren't quite as difficult as they will be for a side like Argyle. So I think there's a number of ways around that, and I don't know, you'll be able to tell me more about this, whether the club already do this, but I think there are things you can do there, like make sure the club travels to some of the more further distance fixtures overnight ahead of a game, so there's generally less travelling on the day of a game, for example. Logistical things like that may be something that Miron chooses to look at much more if the club aren't already doing that heavily. I know that Cercle, funnily enough, when they were playing at home in Bruges, used to stay overnight at a hotel in Bruges, even though they were at home. Now, that in itself is quite unusual, and that was something that Miron liked to do with the squad, because he liked to shut the outside world out for a little bit, particularly that 24-hour period ahead of a game, just so that he could have that kind of quiet time to talk with the players in a relaxed environment about tactics and the game, and to allow players just to isolate themselves from the outside world a little bit. So that's something that he did with Cercle, even when they were playing at home. So you might see that happening with home games with Argyle as well. You might see the players being introduced to a different routine in terms of that immediate period around games and around how the team travel to games as well. And all of those things can definitely have a positive material impact in terms of points for the side. Miron's record actually at Cercle overall is very good. I mean, I think he had a win percentage ratio of around 43%, which is pretty good, really. 101 games, winning 43 of them. Drawing 24 and losing 34, that's a pretty decent record over those 2 years, if you include Europe thrown into that as well. So yeah, those practical and logistical tweaks, I think, can have a real impact, particularly on that away form. I mean, I'm sure somebody inside the club will be speaking to him about that, probably tomorrow, as early as tomorrow, just to go, look, we have had an issue with travelling, we've had an issue with away form, What can we do about that? There'll be a big shopping list of items on and off the pitch, I think, that need addressing. And Miron's the sort of coach whose charisma radiates beyond his own immediate playing role. You're going to start to see people inside the club feeling better about themselves. And I'm talking about, administrative staff and people who don't have a role within kind of frontline football operations. What you find with great coaches is that charisma and man management rubs off on everybody inside a football club, and that whole community starts to feel better about themselves, including the fan base, and then that obviously trickles down into the wider community, into the city as well. He's very well aware of his responsibilities as a leader, not only of the club, but how that fits into representing the city and the community. And fans, those fans who stay in Plymouth, are going to have to get used to seeing a little bit more of Miron, probably in public. He likes to go out for a jog as well, so you may well bump into him unexpectedly in a public park in Plymouth as well. He's not one of those figures that likes to hide. He likes to meet fans. So I think you're in for a fun time.
That was certainly the case with our last head coach. Perhaps
wasn't running in the park.
Was slightly healthy. He was no, he wasn't running in the park. He was.
We saw a bit of him just at irregular times of day.
Running to and from the bar at all hours, perhaps, but that's not for me to say. Go on.
Okay. There's a fun question to end on, but just before we get to that one, very quickly, this one from the Vernon principal. We've talked a lot about why we chose Muslic, but why do you think he chose us? And as the Vernon principal asks, how close has he been to going to another club in England, to your knowledge?
Well, he's been on the radar of a lot of clubs in Europe, and I think in truth, this is definitely a coup for Argyle. They've got in kind of quite quick. I mean, the thing about when Miron left Cercle in early December now, I know, having spoken to him, I spoke to him the day after he got sacked and he got home to his family in Austria. His family, incidentally, are going to stay in Austria. They're not going to be coming to England with him, which is not unusual. A lot of coaches, families don't come with them. Miron, I think, was always quite keen to come to the UK and coach. I spoke to him last in person early on. It'll be, when would that have been? June, before the Belgian season started, when they were playing European qualifiers. We had a conversation, and his contract in Belgium was actually coming to an end at the end of the current season. And I think there was definitely, regardless of how the season panned out for him, there was a sense that that contract was not going to be renewed and that he would move on for a new opportunity. And I think Miron's name has been suggested to the Argyle hierarchy, and they've been aware that they need to do something different. I think his experience in taking a side that are in that relegation dogfight at the end of the table they don't want to be at, not having too much joy on and off the pitch, I think is something he's very familiar with. So I think he recognises that, first of all, but I think he also recognises there's no reason why you can't take a club in that position and build something kind of quite special from it. It's that challenge aspect I was talking about. I think Argyle have moved very, very fast. I think their decision to go with Miron is partly to do with the fact that they've probably been aware that there has been other interest in him. And I know he was looking to take a little bit longer out. The thing, that difficult balancing act you have to juggle when you're in his situation, is the memory of that successful period at Circle has to still be fresh in people's minds. If you stay out of the game for too long, then things change, and that becomes a memory that Circle fans will always remember, and they will always adore Miron. You know, you'll go down as one of the most successful managers in the club's history, actually, for what he achieved in that 2-year period. But yeah, I mean, there were clubs in England who were certainly tracking him, and I know that he was on the name. He was on long lists of technical directors' drawers should circumstances change in clubs, and I think they knew he wasn't going to be out of the game for very, very long. So I think there are definite similarities between Circle as a club and Plymouth, you know, in terms of their general situation, as much as anything else. And I think there was a desire to come to England, and I think Miron understands that in doing well at Argyle, then, you know, that can be good for his career, as well as Argyle as a club, because, you know, as somebody who doesn't get to see Argyle regularly, and in a previous life, I was actually, a long time ago when I was at university, I shared a flat with an Argyle fan. So yeah, I do know a little bit about the club, and they absolutely are, without a shadow of a doubt, a sleeping giant. And talking to somebody the other day who is actually a Reading fan, who I know very well, did say to me that he thought Argyle fans were the best fans in the world. I kid you not. I'll just put that out there while I'm with you. He was very complimentary of the fan base. So I think Miron will have done his research as well and discovered, here's a club I like the look of, a club that has tremendous potential, and a club that fits his own ethic and his own style as well.
Yeah, well, best in the world. We'll take it. We'll certainly take it. Final question, not really about Muslic per se, but while we have you, our benevolent overlord, Aaron Hocking, who runs this podcast, asks, if we were to pick a random Belgian side to start watching/following, who would you suggest and why?
What a question. I get asked this actually quite a lot, and often I'm quite diplomatic about it. For a number of reasons. I suppose it depends on what sort of football you like watching, really. The Belgian game, as I was saying, generally is quite a physical game. There are a number of sides, I think, that are good watches, one of which some English football fans might be a little bit aware of because of their own rise in recent years, and that's a club called Union Saint-Gilloise, who over the last few years have gone quite close to winning the Belgian title. And are really good to watch. They play a good passing, attacking game of football, really entertaining club, really great fan base, really interesting club, rich history. Circle have always been a good side to watch. I think they're on a journey at the moment that is worth checking out. And another one I would personally throw into the mix, Mechelen. They generally play exciting attacking football, and Genk as well, another club that a lot of English football fans will have an awareness of. They have an excellent academy, bring through a lot of really, really good young players that they're able to sell on for big fees. They play a really good offensive football as well. So they're always a good watch. So there you go. There's 3 or 4. That's almost a quarter of the league worth checking out.
And we've had a couple of people in the comments noting that we actually signed Matti Sorinola, our right back from Union Saint-Gilloise. I think
That's right. Yeah.
I believe he was out of contract, Sam, when we signed him. I'm not sure if he was actually technically there
No,
or
I
not.
think.
Or did we sign him from them? I don't think we paid a fee for him, if I remember correctly.
No,
I'm sure
you're
he was
right.
out of contract at the time. I'm sure he was a free
Anyway.
agent when we brought him in. Whether it's one of those foreshore type deals, I don't know, but it was definitely one of those.
Well, anyway, he has played in Belgium.
He has, yeah. He was actually at Union for a little while, but he was largely out of favour. I think he only played about 16, 17 games for Union in his sort of 18 months, 2 years that he was there. He was never a mainstay of the squad, but he is a decent player. And yeah, Miron will certainly know of Matti Sorinola. And I think he has played against Cercle as well. So that will be a player he knows a little bit on a personal level. Yeah.
Great stuff. Sam and Adam, do you have anything else to add while we have the company of Scott?
No, I think we've taken enough of Scott's time. But
the one question that I was going to have, actually, I think, Scott, you've already answered when I was considering, is this a coup for Argyle or is this a coup for Muslic? And I think the message I'm getting that is very encouraging for us. So again, I will echo that appreciation that's been there. I really, really appreciate you giving what now 50 minutes at least of your time to us. I feel like we could carry on this discussion and have great fun for 3 hours, but I assume you've got places to be, so we'll let you go on that.
I will just flash up one. Sorry, that's not the right one. One more quick final question, just on the Sorinola theme. Victor Paulsen, mentioned earlier in this podcast, much maligned figure for much of the season for us, but was excellent yesterday. He also, of course, signed or most recently played for a Belgian team. Any quick insights on him?
Yeah, Victor Paulsen's time in Belgium not too long ago, of course. Yeah, I mean, he was playing with, you mentioned there, Cass Eupen, another side that last season were relegated, and that squad actually was kind of dismantled at that point. Paulsen was one of the victims of that dismantling, I suppose. He was actually one of their better players, to be honest. They had 3 or 4 players who did perform at a decent level for them, even though they were struggling for that entire season. And Victor Paulsen was definitely one of their better players, I would say. Maybe that's because his natural playing style is perhaps better suited to the Belgian game and the kind of tactical aspects of the game in Belgium that you tend to see more often. But yeah, a player I remember well in my recent memory.
Perfect. And with that, Scott, we will let you go. We've got nearly 3,400 people watching, and they've been treated to some fantastic insights there. I think we can all agree on the Belgian League and all things Muslic. And yeah, hopefully we can keep in touch with you in the coming weeks, months. And I really hope this time years, rather than it just being a matter of months again. And yeah, track how Muslic does in the West Country. Scott, thanks so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure to join you guys, and I've now got a very, very good reason to get down to Home Park for a game at some point. And when I was talking to Miron last night, one of the things he did say to me was, anytime you want tickets, you know where I am. So maybe see you down there at a game at some point.
There's an FA Cup tie coming up soon that might be quite the coup.
Lucky. Just quickly, Scott, I don't know if you know as well, one thing that did come to mind before you do go, it's not a question, but Miron actually got the train back from London to Plymouth last night. I'm not sure if that was his idea or the club's idea, but the fans were delighted to see him. He was being absolutely mobbed for selfies. He was being offered food and drink and all sorts. And I think every fan who did meet him said he was an absolute pleasure and was more than willing to give his time for the fans. So hopefully that aspect of his, as you've alluded to, his charismatic personality will win him a lot of friends in Plymouth, hopefully.
He was also a scene that I loved is the camera cut to him at the end of the game yesterday, and he's just filming the full-time reaction on his phone and sort of grinning to himself, which, I really appreciated. Scott, thanks again. And we are back with just the three of us, and that's definitely not a
that's
good way
very
of
convenient.
organising
Wow.
the screen, and nor is that. I don't normally do this hosting,
We're
Mark,
getting
as you
closer.
can tell.
And we're
And
back to
that's
you
not
again.
right either.
There we go.
We'll just settle on this one. I basically get very bamboozled when there's only three people around. Do we have any other business to
Well,
discuss?
we haven't really, barring like one sentence, we haven't touched on the cup tie. Maybe just 5 minutes on that.
Yeah, sure. That'll take us through to 10 o'clock, and then we will sign off. Yes, for those of you who've been living under a rock for the last few hours or engrossed in looking up Belgian football statistics, Plymouth Argyle have been drawn at home to Liverpool in the fourth round of the FA Cup. An absolutely fantastic moment when that one came out of the hat. Obviously, it's not our first rendezvous with Liverpool in the Cup in recent years. We had that incredible goalless draw there in 2017 and then brought them back to home park for a replay, which we lost narrowly by 1-0. I watched both of those games in a soccer bar in New York and actually left my Argyle scarf in there, hanging on the rafters alongside their other display of football memorabilia. So I will hopefully be able to get into the ground for this one. Adam, what are your thoughts on this Liverpool tie?
It's obviously exciting, and it's obviously going to be a great occasion. And depending on how circumstances go, I mean, we're obviously not going to be starting as favourites, but I don't think it's out of the question that we could at the very least give them a game, mainly because their schedule is very packed. They've got, much as we have 5 league fixtures in between, I think they have 5, 6, maybe even 7 in various competitions between then. They'll be coming off the back of this on a second leg with Spurs, which will take place on the Thursday before. And by the way, I mean, what sort of planning is that from the EFL that they've put a second leg of a semi-final on a Thursday before FA Cup weekend? I mean, yeah, wonderful. Well done, lads. Yeah, that's really helped everyone out. So there will be rotation from them.
Didn't realise we've been joined by Jurgen Klopp in the podcast this evening.
Hey, all I'm saying is Liverpool had Tuesday and Wednesday free as well. So it's going to impact our Millwall game. That's what I'm more annoyed about. I know Luton had to be cancelled, but they've had to rearrange the Millwall game for their own fault. So yeah, cheers guys.
Just to the bit, those you may not know why that is. I did tweet about it earlier. For those who don't follow me on Twitter, but are watching and listening, that there has to be now, or if this is not a codified law, it's certainly an unwritten law. At least a 3-day gap from game to game. The days of like 48-hour gaps between games some of us grew up with are very much gone. So with that, with Liverpool playing on the Thursday night, the game can only be on the Sunday. And the reason I say the Sunday, not the Monday, is because Argyle are due to play Millwall on the Tuesday, which, assuming the Liverpool game is on the Sunday, that Millwall game will have to move to the Wednesday. And the reason it then cannot be on the Monday is then if the Millwall game will move to the Thursday, the Blackburn game would then have to move to the Sunday. So it's far too many moving pieces for the scheduling to deal with. So I think the way that it's probably going to be the route of least chaos is going to be that the Liverpool game will be on the Sunday, almost certainly, and the Millwall game will be moved to the Wednesday, I imagine. So it will then be, 3 games in under a week: Liverpool home, Millwall home, and Blackburn away.
In short, yeah, Jurgen Klopp had a point. Like, one bit of organisation for an EFL Cup semi-final has caused all this nonsense. So yeah, incredible as ever. What I'll say though,
won't someone think of Tamworth though? Come on, someone think of Tamworth.
Yeah, I mean, we all sit here knowing that's a disgrace and don't have to say any further, I think. But yeah, I've seen a few comments about the sort of team Liverpool will put out, and hey, it's still going to be a strong side. They're not going to be playing the under-12s here. There's probably a player that's going to start up front with them for them who we'd very happily take in Jayden Danns, if he's not signed for Argyle in the meantime, of course. So when you consider that those are their 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th choices for a number of positions, and they probably all slot into our side quite nicely, it gives you an idea of the magnitude of the challenge. But hey, we had exactly the same at Brentford yesterday, where we're facing a much stronger side than ourselves, and it's just going to be about application. No matter what side Liverpool put out, rotation will make it slightly disjointed. I'm not expecting them to keep the level of performance, even if the individual talent is going to be better than what we've got available. So, you know, we it's a slim chance, but Argyle winning yesterday was a slim chance. Who's to say we can't at the very least give them a game, and I can't say take it to a replay anymore, but take it deep, maybe into extra time, and who the hell knows from there. But as I said right at the start of this, it's the occasion. It's it's going to be a brilliant time and a really nice baptism, as it were, for the new management team to be able to come in and have this on the horizon, which is going to be a free hit without too much pressure. But yeah. Interesting to be getting more Scousers into Home Park, which seems to have been a familiar theme recently. I wonder by then if we'll have heard of a potential departure of one of them who's been conspicuous in his absence in the boardroom. But we'll see how the
Callum Wright wouldn't
communications
need to go in the boardroom, would he, Adam? He's a player.
Wow. Is it the Aaron Hocking role? I'm very disappointed.
Just before we sign off, do we think Arne Slot is a pasty man?
We've got to get him an even bigger pasty than the one we gave Klopp, just to keep the good hospitality going.
Good. And on that note, unless there's anything else that we need to discuss, guys, if you can think of anything, we've been on for 2 hours now, so it might be potentially time to call it a night as we head into the new week. I'll just sign off by saying that I cannot remember 3 back-to-back days as insane as these in the history of Plymouth Argyle Football Club, from the Twitter drama and thinking we all definitely were having Stephen Schumacher coming into the building on Friday, to the left field appointment of Miron Muslic, to yesterday's wonderful display at Brentford and incredible limbs in the away, and through to today with our draw against Liverpool in the Cup. It has been a rollercoaster ride. We've been delighted to be joined by so many people as we've tried to make sense of it for you both on Friday and tonight. We've got 3,480 people watching us at this moment in time, which is absolutely incredible. Once again, your support is very much appreciated. What are the things that Aaron normally says when he's signing off? Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff on your usual social platforms. You can see the various ways to do that and the various platforms that we are on below. It just remains for me to once again thank Scott Coyne for coming on and sharing his brilliant insights. Be sure to go and check out his output, and hopefully we'll have him back on again in the future. Thanks also to Joe Bell for hosting the first hour of tonight's show, and thanks to Sam and Adam for their insights as always. I'm going to go and rest my vocal cords. Keep it green.